and that's us live. So back for another week, and as usual, we don't have any particular plans. We will just roll with it and take it wherever it goes. Let me kick off in my traditional fashion, though, and start off with Bill. What have you been up to this week?
Hey, I'm planning on moving. I haven't moved recently, and I'm 8 blocks away from the beach, so I'm going to move 4 blocks closer and a couple towns over.
You do realise this halves your excuse for not surfing.
I'm going to have to learn how to surf. I think I've gotten that through my head at this point. And the town I'm going to be moving to has a beach that's well-known surf place.
Very nice.
So it should be fun.
Excellent. Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Kristin, what have you been up to this week? Got no sound.
No.
No sound. You mime beautifully, but there's no sound. Laurie, good to have you join us, Laurie Varga. So, what have you been up to this week? How's your week been?
It's been insane. We're working on buying a house, and so just like Bill, I'm going to be moving.
Excellent. Do you have a spare room for Bill?
If he wants to sleep in the office, sure, but there's no beach. And definitely no surfing.
Snow surfing. It's a new sport.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's called snowboarding.
Let's see if Kristin's got a sound back. Yes, no? No.
I'm just kidding. Can you hear me?
I was going to say, otherwise you can do the rest of this hangout in the form of interpretive dance.
What is miming? Okay.
My light's a little funky right now, so carry on.
How long have you been in the existing house, Laurie? How long's it been?
We're just renting, so we've only been here about 2 years.
Right. Yeah, that is the downside with renting, is you have to move a lot, because it just seems like everybody wants to, get you out and be able to put their rates up a lot on new tenants, except, where Bill is, where they just want to charge him a lot to renew. That's about right, isn't it, Bill?
Actually, they raised our rates quite a bit, and but that wasn't why. We were only renting temporarily until we could find a place. So,
if I break my lease early, they charge me a fee that's 1.5 times the amount of rent. So if I move out early, I have to pay 2.5 the amount of times of rent for that month.
Wow.
So at the end of the 12-month lease period, I can go month to month, and then I don't have that extravagant fee, but they raised the rate $700 a month.
Whoa!
Month to month, right. They don't want me to stay. I'm leaving.
You don't want to live somewhere where you're not wanted.
No.
They just don't know who you are.
It does.
It doesn't
kind
matter.
of feel like they've been blended away doing a robbery without having to pay for a gun. Definitely, there is some robbery going on there.
Yeah. Now, if I moved 2 towns north of me, I'd have to live on the Marine base. I'd live there for free. They'd pay me to live there. I don't want to do that.
Wait, so Camp Pendleton?
Yeah.
You can live on base being a civilian?
No, you can't. You have to enlist. I'm not going to do that.
I don't blame you.
I'm not sure they've got an SEO division yet.
No.
Oh no! They do have
First armored SEOs.
Oh my gosh! I just got a visual with like the army hat and everything. I mean, not army because they're Marines, but like that kind of shell turtle kind of hat on top of Bill.
Yeah. No, I reckon armored vehicle. Definitely.
Oh, well, that's it. Don't you know that the Marines are on the front line?
It's certainly one way of getting him to see, isn't it? So, my week has been typical, really. It seems to be one of those ones. There's times I feel like a duck, kind of serene on the surface, but underneath everything is going like the clappers. And it's been one of those weeks. I seem to have been busy non-stop and yet have nothing particular to show for it.
I hate those weeks.
Yeah.
It is kind of one of those ones where you are paddling and all the effort is going to keeping above water rather than actually getting anything finished. It's kind of keeping everything maintained. And I hate them.
I started writing for On Track Tips again.
Oh, cool.
So, I actually can't feel what you're feeling right now. Because I have been accomplishing something, so yay. But I'm sorry for your loss.
I would imagine, Laurie, that a lot of writing a book is like that. And, I know you published last year, so was it one of those things where it felt like half of the time of writing that book it wasn't something that was going to show immediately in the end result? You're agonising over exactly which way to go with things and rewriting paragraphs. And, you haven't got a new paragraph, you've got a better paragraph, but you haven't got a new paragraph. Is that the same kind of experience with that?
Yeah, gosh, writing a book is like, I'm working on the sequel now, and it's like I might sit for an hour and be like, yeah, and then look and I'm like, 200 words? What? So, it's like, wow, you just inch along. It's like a little snail, inch along.
I wrote a haiku!
With some of the ebooks I've seen some people put out, some of the sort of SEO guru type ebooks, I take 200 words is half the book.
Well, yeah. These days, that's a lot.
I do hate that. I'm very old school. I remember, when books were books and they were big, heavy things. The heavier it was, the better. And, it gave you a good amount to read. You shouldn't be able to get through a book in a single day unless you've, literally taken the day off and you've got nothing else to do and you can dive into that book, which I love with some books, but an ebook, it feels more like a magazine.
Or a brochure. Yeah, that happens a lot.
Let me quickly put up the comments in a different stream, because I know we've got plenty of people joining us this week. We've got Carl there, who is doing well. William, who was congratulating you on the sound trick, Kristin.
Thank you.
Jeff is saying that those weeks where you're paddling, they're frustrating at the time, but they can yield huge gains later on. And yeah, exactly that. When the maintenance is done, you are free to make good progress later on. And Peter Atherley says writing is in his life at the moment as well. So yeah, we'll definitely have to catch up on that, Peter. We'll be putting the live link up soon for anybody that wants to jump in. How has the experience of doing that book been? Did it deliver what you'd hoped it would deliver? Has it been more rewarding or less rewarding than you'd expected?
It did not deliver the fame and fortune that I was anticipating.
Oh, no.
At least not yet. Not as quickly as I had anticipated.
They always say you don't write books for profit, at least not until you've got a series. A book is all about positioning yourself for the speaker tours and things like that. As any kind of writer, even fiction writers will then go on to do seminars on how to write your own fiction part. And,
God!
Yeah, that's where they make the money. The money in publishing is only in the multi-book deals, in getting a contract.
Sometimes, yeah. Based on the research that I've done yeah, most people don't make money on one book, particularly one novel, unless you're doing nonfiction. And like you said, you've got the full package, like you're doing the book tour and everything. But with novels, it looks like most people say you don't start making money till your third book. And then I've seen some stats for best-selling authors. I think most of them wrote an average of 13 books before they wrote a bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to write as quickly as I can. To get up there, it's gonna take me a while.
Especially when you keep writing haikus.
I don't even like haiku.
I know.
It's one of those things. There are people who buck the trend, but when you look at it, you look at the amount of years they often spent on that first book that went big.
Yeah.
Some of them are absolutely insane amounts of time. The Lord of the Rings is, of course, one of those books. Wasn't it something like 13 years to produce that book?
But it set the stage.
Yes, and it was worth every minute of it. I think it's a very, very good book, and it created a new genre. And much of the way he wrote that book hadn't been used before, but is now the standard. So much other stuff is based on it. Then there's things like Catch-22. I don't know if you've read that, but that is one of my favourite books. It's difficult for black comedy to usually make it through print. Black comedy works in visual media much better than print usually, I find. But Catch-22 is one of the greatest books. I would certainly put it as one of the great works of literature. It's absolute genius. His second one, not so good. Sorry, if there's any great fans of it out there, but no, second one, nowhere near as good. Catch-22 just really hit it.
I should read it.
Definitely. If you haven't, anybody out there that hasn't read Catch-22, get it from your library if you don't want to commit offhand, but honestly, it's one of those books, you will love it, you will reread it. It's one of my absolute favourites. I've probably read it through about a dozen times in the past 10 years.
Wasn't that the one that the Leonardo DiCaprio film was based on?
No, it's Catch Me If You Can.
Right. Oh, was that? But that was based on a book too. Okay, so never mind. No, there was. I'm thinking something different.
Catch-22 is Second World War. It introduces us to some wonderful characters all through. There is Major. There is, of course, Yossarian, the main hero. It's a beautiful look at some of the crazy things people do and the way people get carried away with them. And characters in war films, Kelly's Heroes and the sort of crooked quartermaster in that was definitely partially based on the quartermaster that's in Catch-22, who finds a way to make war profitable for all sides, like arranging to bomb the enemy. You get paid compensation if you allow them to bomb you, because that keeps the brass happy, which enables you to carry on doing all the little black market deals that you do. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. So many little observations on life that are hilariously true and sad at the same time, but some really uplifting moments too. I didn't find it depressing in the least. So definitely a good one. Let me quickly pull up some comments again. Zara is absolutely agreeing. Catch-22, yes. Michael Shane David says he started writing as well. He began a few weeks ago. He wonder will it becomes a book to does. Yeah. Peter says he's writing sites, writing books, writing emails. Yes. Oh boy. You can't imagine that I know that some of the older generation, they struggle to put together a letter. They kind of know, but they often want a second opinion. There were a lot of people who just weren't very confident writers. Do you think that's really starting to change with our generation, or is it simply that we are the ones that get it and there's still a lot of people who don't get it, who can't write? Bill, what about you? What do you think on that?
I was blogging one day, and I went into the control panel of Blogspot and looked. It listed how many words I had published in the past 7 or 8 years, and I was surprised to see that it was over 1 million words at that point, and that was like 7 years ago.
Yep.
I've been blogging ever since. You know, blog post isn't a real blog post until it's at least 1,500 words from me. And,
Yeah.
you know, I do 2, 3 a week. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, I'm exactly the same. You know, if you're going to explain something, then you need to explain it in detail, and you sometimes need to explain it basically and with an example, and then kind of refresh people's memory or set some limitations to it as well. Yeah, by the time you've explained it those 3 ways and done it thoroughly, I can't imagine writing anything worthwhile in much less than 1,000 words, unless I work for hours to make it, a genius piece of concision.
Right.
Blogging requires length.
The last thing I wrote was about Google crawling text in images, and how they've come out with a new patent that says that they might start doing that at some point soon. And I had to start that off with the problem that existed before then, with people putting pictures up of their businesses' addresses in pictures.
Yep.
So that search engine couldn't read those. Yeah.
Just for a little bit of background for any viewers that aren't quite so up on this kind of stuff, optical character recognition, recognizing text that's in image form, that's been around and been useful for search engines and others for a long time. What Google's latest works are more about is, if you take a picture of a building, it can read what's on the sign on the building. If you've taken a picture of, public transport going past that's got an ad on the side, it would be able to read the text on the ad. It would be able to read number plates. It would be able to read things that were in the picture, but not necessarily things that were designed to be read in the picture. So, not when you just made a caption of words as one of those inspirational images, but actually reading what's there.
And Google's been saying that they've been able to do that for a few years. If you look at something like Google Goggles, you can take a picture of a product, and it'll tell you where the product's for sale, which website you can go to learn more about it. It'll show you similar images. If you have a famous athlete on the box, say you have a box of Wheaties, and there's an athlete, they'll tell you who that person is. So facial recognition, object recognition, landmark recognition, Google has the capabilities to do that, but they don't actually read the text on websites that's in images. It's not indexed. And they may start doing that soon, which would be nice.
Yes.
If you have navigation links on your site, Google can't OCR those and create a site link set for you in search results because of those. They have a patent that says that they might, but they're not. So I wrote a blog post about that. It took me 2,500 words to talk about that, because I wanted to cover all that stuff. I want to say things that may change.
Yes, and it's funny the amount of research that goes into this, and then the ways that things get used. Google, we know, got really intelligent about images. Do you remember the little April Fool's thing, or whatever it was, when they had the Hoff photobombing everyone's Google images? Do you remember when that happened?
When it had the what? I'm sorry?
The Hoff.
What is the Hoff?
Like he came in and he would like photobomb. He was like the lifeguard on a.
David Hasselhoff?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
You
Okay, so
California,
when
yeah.
you uploaded a picture, it would meld in a picture of David Hasselhoff. But the clever part was it got the lighting about right to go with the picture. It carefully positioned him in the picture, and most of them came out very well. It was very intelligently positioning where the Hoff would appear in the picture and matching the lighting and general effect. That's a lot of processing that was going on, and you know that's a really advanced stuff. And all they used it for that we saw was a gag.
And Google has done artificial intelligence stuff where they've identified cats and learned what cats were, unique from people, and so on, by showing a computer lots of videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
They were able to recognize cats without learning independently what cats were.
Yes. And of course, being able to match it to our word for it and the sound of that word and so on and so forth. Yeah, absolutely. That was part of the first test of machine learning, to see how well a machine could learn for itself what things were, how to recognize them, how to name them, etc., etc.
Right. Google bought the artificial intelligence deep learning company DeepMind.
Yeah.
And they've been teaching computers how to play Asteroids and other arcade games for the past couple of years.
Yeah. So if your computer stopped working and when you're depending on it to help you get a project finished, it claims it's ill and later finds it's playing Asteroids. Now you know who to blame.
Sound like God, Ammon.
Don't you know he is? That's why I believe.
I was looking for God all this time, and finally I found him.
And a Google Hangout. Nice.
Google Hangout.
Ours, no less.
Well, didn't they say something about he will be hiding among you, no?
Yeah, Bing, of course, will post a complete retraction that I can't possibly be God, not on Google Hangouts. Peter Hatherley says that he first noticed that it was happening with Google Image Search when it picked up some text without an alt tag, although it can also use clues in surrounding text and page context. Jeff's shared one of the photo. Now, if you look at that particular image, you can see not that it's matched the image in the mirror, but it has matched the lighting of the frame and wall around it. And that's what I meant about how cleverly that particular algorithm had been working. And it's put him into a corner away from the main. We know that cameras these days can recognize faces. A piece of technology that fits inside a very flat piece of equipment does that, but seeing it just on the fly on an internet scale was something quite new for me, and I thought pretty clever. And wasteful, Who's got the sound playing? We've got an echo.
Okay, I have no other sound buttons on my tabs.
So I realized that I joined this chat on my other profile. Now I'm echoing. Is that just me? Can anyone else hear that?
No.
I could at first, and then it went away.
Woo!
Oh yes, we're definitely getting green dots on you. Wait, now we're getting them on me. Okay, let me close some tabs.
So I've had to log in as my other profile so that I can comment. There's some great comments coming in from people here.
Oh, for sure.
I can't even keep track of them all. There was one that was interesting, and I don't remember who said it. Something about Fabrizio is asking Bill, how do you define how much is right to write in a post? I mean, what is the best length to express that concept well?
Yeah, there we go.
I've written 3-word blog posts and I've written 3,000-word blog posts. It depends upon the subject.
Yeah.
You know, whatever's appropriate for what you're writing about.
It's one of those things, I think, when people try and set, you know, our house style is that we're going to write 1,000-word blog posts, that is a limitation. It doesn't mean that you're going to then be able to cover all kinds of topics, because there are topics that are going to require more than 1,000 words, and there are topics that are going to drag if you try and spend 1,000 words on them. You know, some small news articles, you are going to struggle to try and find 1,000 words. Certainly, one of the things I have against content farms, these places where you buy content at, you know, so 500 words for $5 or whatever the hell it is these days, is by defining that this thing is going to be 500 words. I don't know. I find that a kind of very middling range. It's okay for general news. It's no good for any kind of in-depth article. Pages that have tended to rank well, when Mars and some others did surveys, they found that, you know, the most successful blog posts tended to be 1,200 to 1,500 words. That was the kind of length and depth of content that was working well. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, 1,200 or 1,500 words of anything are going to do well, but it meant that the people who naturally tend to write that length, who tend to write in depth about certain subjects, tend to do very well. There are certainly, you know, plenty of people out there doing longer. I've written longer. I know Bill's written longer, and some topics absolutely demand that. Does that mean that people are necessarily going to read all of those long posts? No, of course it doesn't. And, there's a lot of people who will skip and skim and just read the parts they like. But you can only write the way that a thing deserves to be written.
I would say
That's
my
interesting.
philosophy.
Go on, Laurie.
Yeah, I've read that as well. I mean, I was going to say my philosophy on writing, and this is my personal thing. I mean, everybody has their own approach to it. But I'm a concise writer, so I find the fewer words that you can use to convey something, the better. So for me, every word has weight and meaning, and if it's not adding to what you're trying to say or what you're trying to prove, then you just get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot more effort to write concisely than it does, and time and practice than it does to just blather on. Anybody can do that.
One of my all-time favourite quotes is, of course, the classic Mark Twain one. I'm sorry about the length of this letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one.
Yeah.
It's so true.
It's like Strunk and White, Elements of Style. They have one of those that goes, omit needless words. And I usually just shorten that to omit words.
Well said.
So, yeah, we've got a couple more comments following up on this. Craig says less is more. Absolutely right. Fabrizio says it's much more than about character length, and if you're... It's basically that kind of thing, you know, never mind the length, feel the quality. It's not about how much of it, it's about how much good there is in it and how well it's delivered. And that's always going to be the thing. And you know, you can't turn that into a formula that 1,000 words is ideal or 1,500 words is ideal. It's more about the quality and how well you describe something, and some things are going to require you to give a lot more explanation than other things. There are times when 2,000 words can breeze by. You know, it's such an engaging read it doesn't feel like 2,000 words, and there are other times when 500 words feels like 400 too many.
I always feel like I get gypped when there's not enough expository. And I know that a lot of people actually feel like expository can kind of go on and on and on, and they wish that it would just get to the action. But that, to me, like, you've got to have a good setup.
I think I miss out when people don't put their opinion in something they write.
Ah.
When they don't give their own personal perspective or their point of view, and they just come out and say something without adding that element to it.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
give me
I like my writers to put something of themselves in what they're saying, and that should be their take on it, what they think about it, what they feel about it, their opinion. I'm absolutely with you there, Bill.
I think another thing that matters as well is if the writing is good, it doesn't matter how long it is. If it's engaging, then you don't even notice the time passing, Like you said, Eamon, those, Lord of the Rings, you've got the whole day to just plow through. I don't know if I could read that all in one day, but...
I don't think I could.
You know what I mean.
That would be pushing it.
I think I would be blind at the end of the day.
Yeah, maybe the sub-books. Maybe.
Not to turn this too much into like an SEO thing, but when Kier asks, do the keyword density and content still matter? He was reading is a factor in Moz and what percentage of it, and that is actually a question that, like, Bill, I think that you've answered this before, or maybe it was Terry, and he said at least one.
I think it's total mythology. Keyword density was something that companies made up to sell SEO tools.
Wait, say that again.
Keyword density was something that software makers manufactured to sell their tools, to get people to buy them.
Oh my gosh, it's snake oil.
What the density of keywords were in something you've written. And
in effect, yes. But where it started was when we were looking at search engines in the early days, where on-page was pretty much the only factor, certainly the only factor that SEOs were looking at, we needed ways to talk about the way that words went on the page. So we had things like keyword prominence. This is how early that word appears. So if you've got 100 words and the very first word is the keyword, that's kind of the 100% prominence. It's the most prominent word on the page. Whereas if it's the last, then it's got a 1% prominence. So keyword prominence was one of those things. We had count, which is the absolute number of times that it appears, and density was one of those ways of talking about per amount of content, how much of it is the keyword, how densely is this keyword in there. And it was a metric that we used to discuss that, and therefore software that was designed by SEOs in the early days included that. But it's never been a search engine metric. It was simply one that we were using to look at and talk about the ways that one page differed from another.
And it's because we weren't learned enough in information retrieval to realize that there was something called term frequency over inverse document frequency, which said that important word put the words that you think are important on your page, and if they're really important, they don't show up on a lot of other documents on the web either. So your page is more relevant for those terms if those words appear frequently on your page and not too many other pages on the web.
Huh.
Yeah. Raquel says that answers his question, and happy that we could do that for you. But it is one of those things. Keyword density is a metric we made up. It's useful for when you need to talk about it. That's the term for it. But it's not something search engines use. It's not something search engines ever used. It was simply a way that we could talk about the structure of keywords within a page.
I've noticed that that Yoast uses the keyword prominence. I'm not sure if they phrase it that way, but they always try to give the instruction like how close is your keyword to the front of your writing, and that drives me crazy and like absolutely nuts, because the way that I was taught to write, or actually not necessarily taught to write, but the writing style that I naturally gravitated to was like the surprise factor. And so I like to, give my exposure or whatever. I like to like lead everything up and build it up to, boom, this is my topic, or this is what you're supposed to get from this. I like to, make it more of like something that I'm leading the reader on to discover with me, sort of thing. So the keyword prominence is like really tough for me.
Kristin, are you familiar with something called the inverse pyramid approach to writing?
I don't think I've heard it called that,
Okay.
but I can imagine.
It's something that news writers use when they write. You put the conclusion at the top of what you're writing, so it shows up. So when wired services send out news stories, if the most important thing is at the top, it doesn't get cut off when they try to shorten it to publish it in places where maybe there won't be enough space to print it all out.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You start with your conclusion, and you explain how you got there. Or you start with the most important line, and you explain how you got there. So people who were writing for search engines thought that a search engine crawler needed to find the keywords early on and would think that those were the most important words on the page. So you would put your keywords near the top. It's not necessarily true, but it's what people did.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by true?
That's to do with titles and things like that. Usually if words appear in the titles, they're quite important. If they appear in headings, they're quite important. For obvious reasons, those are the areas where we've got the fewest words and therefore had to be the most concise. So this is going back to what Laurie was saying about her writing. Every word having meaning. When you've got a very short piece of text, it's much more likely that somebody has made sure that every word in there has specific meaning. And therefore you can count those words more strongly.
It's like Twitter. Everything is of importance, right?
Ask why Wikipedia pages tend to rank so well in search results. And the title of your Wikipedia post includes the subject of that page. It's always true for every Wikipedia article. The most important thing is in the subject. It's in the URL. Yep. It's always in the URL.
And of course, there are so many links created every single day to some or other Wikipedia page that the domain authority of that domain is just sky high. There are probably more links to Wikipedia in a day than there are to Google.
Really? Wow.
And that's just on Wikipedia.
It would be very difficult to find any generally popular internet forum where at least one Wikipedia link isn't dropped every single day.
Right. People tend to link to Wikipedia.
Yeah.
It may not, teachers may say don't cite Wikipedia pages as your primary sources for information, but they're useful, and they often contain helpful information that's a good starting point when you're researching something.
Yeah, go down to the end. Whoo, you got like a whole resource library right there, practically. Do you think that like some writers, is it possible to achieve a status in this day and age where writers don't have to use that approach, and people will, their audience will read whatever they are, their subject line is,
yes,
just because they know that they're a good writer?
Yes, absolutely. There are people who will get more attention and comments than if their article was published under a pseudonym that nobody knew it would possibly get. Seth Godin can write about his shopping day. He could post his shopping list and say how busy the supermarket was, and he will get 100 people talking about it on their blogs.
He was exactly the
if
person
he
I was
wrote
thinking
the
of.
exact same post but posted it as, you know, Joe Blogs on some quiet little domain, it wouldn't get those same links. You know, that's the way of people.
But
That's
does it
fun.
mean that you can't, like, if that's your style, that's your thing, and you keep doing your thing because it's what you're good at, do you think it's still possible through other techniques to do that, or do you think you have to achieve the status first and then you're gonna be like, okay, and now we're gonna do something a little different because I'm cool and you all know it?
There are certainly, you know, writers who make a break from their style and experiment and play with new things. I think most writers will. I think most writers will, particularly those that have to write, that write for the passion, the love of writing. You have to keep pushing that envelope because you do love what you're doing and you want to learn more about your craft. You want to learn more about your audience. You want to learn more about what works and what doesn't. But of course, it's also risky because sometimes you do change. And at first, people are all, oh yeah, they've written it's great, and then it's like they suddenly turn and I don't read that anymore. You never post about that. Well, you never said anything when he was testing this out and seeing what the reaction was like. You were all 100% positive until you got fed up with it. And that happens. So you do have to be careful of that when experimenting with formats, is that your fans can be a little sycophantic. They can be a little bit, oh, it's wonderful, or it's terrible, and nothing in between. And sometimes, you know, they'll be saying it's wonderful, and it's not really. They're trying to show their brand loyalty, and then they get bored of it and leave without ever having said it, you know, why, or that this wasn't their thing. And you don't always get warnings, so it is something to be careful of, particularly for big brands. Going back to that pyramid thing, Bill, that I've actually used that a different way on the web. There was one of these places that does, you know, professional consumer reviews, that reviews products and things like that.
Right.
And of course, they wanted to put all of that content behind a paywall because that's, you know, that's their product, that's what they're selling. And I said, actually, you should go the other way. Put the conclusion up there. Tell them which is the best washing machine, which is the best car, which is the best. But tell them that to see the testing and on what criteria, that's what they pay for. You know, if you want to see the full details of how we came to this conclusion, subscribe. I think that's fair, and it does both things. You've now given them the instant answer, but almost everybody is going to want to know why. Some of them will trust you enough, right? But most of them are going to want to know why, and they will much more be able to, you know, pay for that content to learn the why because they've already seen the conclusion and want to know.
Right. We had a client that had a website filled with white papers, and you had to register to read the white papers so that they would get a lead. And it's like, you're taking all this wonderful content that's really informative that people might search for, and you're hiding it behind this registration wall. So you're losing customers because they're not finding the stuff that you've written based on the abstracts that you're providing, because you're not providing very informative information in those abstracts.
Yep.
Which is like probably the opposite of what they were trying to achieve, right?
Right.
But sometimes it depends. However, I think that sometimes it depends, especially in industry that are regulated. Like I worked with pharma before, or even in banking, there's some content that somehow is regulated. So that approach of hiding it happens, and there's some beautiful content all hidden. But I think that what Ammon suggested is very clever, because most of the generally what they do to generate those leads, they give the intro what people are going to find, but then that is equal to the guy that hasn't done the proper research and hasn't got the right white paper. But if you give the conclusion, it's generally more kind of reach, and doesn't have to be all the research, but just giving a hint of what will happen, and also it can trigger more interest, because otherwise people have got so much good content, but then they're not going to show it to you, and seriously, people are not going to just always going to give your detail or register to a service just to see a piece of content.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a thing that every author is going to struggle with as well. Look how important the dust cover description of a book is, or that little intro paragraph just inside the cover.
Oh my God! Can I just say that is having had to write that and rewrite that and rewrite that and rewrite that. Oh my God, that's almost harder than writing the book, because inside the book I can make mistakes, and I don't mean like typos and stuff like that, but I can maybe use too many words to describe something, or meander a little bit, or maybe not, maybe not set things up perfectly. But with the back cover or the blurb or even the synopsis and stuff, I can't even screw up a single word, and I'm trying to guess what the audience wants to see, and I mean, there's the way that I see the book, but how do I explain that to somebody who hasn't seen the book?
Yeah.
It's horrible. I've rewritten it so many times. I still, even now, I go back, a few weeks later and reread it, and I'm like, oh, I got to change that sentence, and now I got to change it on Goodreads and Amazon and my website, and and I can't change the book itself. I mean, I could, but that's such a huge pain in the butt that I haven't bothered. But yeah, that's talk about every word having to count. That's intense.
I'm not very into it, but do you actually rewrite it based on where the book is published, or based on what audience you think it could reach eventually, or is just one?
You can. I mean, a part of the struggle for me is I'm in the process of figuring out exactly who the audience is. So what do they respond to? So that sometimes I'll have different descriptions in different places and see what kind of result I get. It's kind of like A/B testing, but I'm not as on top of it as I could be, because I have other things to do with my life.
That brings up such a great thing that I've been wondering about. How do you go about finding your audience? Like you mentioned, testing things, but then what? You distribute it out to people free, or what are the specifics of it? How do people that are just starting out begin to find their audience?
Some people have it set up ahead of time, especially if you're tapping into an audience that already exists. Like if you have a very specific genre type and there are other books that are similar, like if you're doing, it's like a Lord of the Rings style, right? Or science fiction, there's very specific things for that. Unfortunately, I don't like to do what other people are doing. It just kind of comes naturally to me. So I've written something that's a bit different than what already exists, and so I'm having a hard time. I'm slowly making progress, chipping away and finding out who the audience is, but I'm still not totally there yet. It's kind of like finding your tribe. Especially if you're a bit of an outsider, it takes time to find your people.
Yeah. I always describe it as, there are two ways of doing this. There is the commercial writer and there is the passion writer. The commercial writer starts by identifying the audience and then writes the content for that audience, whereas the passion writer, they build an audience for who they are, for how they want to write. You write a certain way, and as long as you are consistent, people will find it, people will talk about it, and your audience will build. It takes longer, and it doesn't always work. There are some great writers out there that didn't get recognised at all until after they'd passed, sadly.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff written, and even more in the age of the internet. So standing out can be tough, but you instantly know which is your style. A lot of us in SEO, we have to write for a given audience. There are already customers for this business, and we're writing stuff for those customers. We know exactly what we know about the customers, and then we tailor what we write to them. Whereas with passionate writing, You write what you need to write or what you want to write, and the audience that it resonates is what forms.
Yeah, and so I'm looking for that audience and waiting for them to resonate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I know it'll come. It's just one of those things that it just requires a lot of patience and a lot of writing and faith.
Well, yeah, and I imagine, like, which one has more legs? Like, which one can you stick with? Is there, like, a high turnover or a higher turnover rate for writers that are not writing from passion or for the sake of it?
Not necessarily. They're just writing sometimes in different areas. There are some authors who I would say straddle both sides. Stephen King would be one of the writers I would probably put in that category. There are some works he definitely writes from passion, and I would say he has a passion for writing. But there are times when you can definitely tell he is courting a particular audience and he is writing the stuff that is going to work for them, rather than writing what he wants to write and waiting for the people it resonates with to find it. Yeah, do you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So there are people who do a bit of both. The thing is, if you can write for a given audience, if you can do the commercial style of writing, there's always work. It may not be writing books, but there is always work for a good writer who can read an audience and produce the stuff they want to read. Let's face it, the internet is built on that. There are thousands of blogs built exactly that way. I would say that a lot of the good YouTubers are doing very similar things. They're finding a game, they understand what the audience of that game is, and then they're doing videos that appeal to that audience about that game. Or they understand a particular demographic that are interested in makeup tips, and then they talk in a way that's going to resonate with that audience about makeup tips.
You talking about makeup tips is really strange, Eamon. There's something, I don't know, there's something about that example that just gave me a whole new look at you.
Oh, well, it's, if you think about, like, he grew up doing Shakespeare, it kind of fits.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense then. I mean, I think too, the key thing is that if you're trying to find, if you're trying to work to create something for a specific audience, it's mega helpful if you're a member of that audience, like if you actually care, if you don't like a certain type of video game but you're trying to tap into some video game craze but it's not really your thing, it'll just die and peter out, and then you lose there's that inauthenticity thing. I think there's very few people can pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a great YouTube success called The Guild, which was about, it was kind of about World of Warcraft players, but by somebody who'd spent way too many hours playing World of Warcraft and understood what that world was like and the geekiness of it and the angst of it. And yeah, absolutely. It was wonderful, wonderful stuff. Really mega successful, won awards. One of the first real crossover pieces, I'd say, to go from YouTube success to much bigger real-world film TV success. That was the wonderful Felicia Day that was behind that. Very talented actress anyway. But if you haven't seen that, check it out. The Guild. Very good stuff.
Well, on that note, I'm going to head out, guys. I got to go get my car from the shop and then get my son from school. So,
thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It was nice to see that in my little email because I wouldn't have noticed it otherwise.
Absolutely. A real pleasure to have you join us. We're kind of at the time where we've got to start doing the wrap-up stuff anyway. Lovely to have you join us, Laurie, and hopefully we'll have you back on another week.
Yes, I hope so too. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
So, Fab, you've kind of got the same position as me. I've got no camera this week, so I've used the special effects instead.
Yeah, I have no tricks. It's just a poor connection. That's what I'm left with. Yeah.
It happens. So, have you recently moved or something like that?
No. It's just that I'm between jobs, and I'm not as at work as it used to be, or I'm moving quite a lot, so I'm home at this time rather than in the library. So that's why I need to I need to deal with this connection.
Find an internet cafe that wants some free publicity. And tell them that, you know, if they can give you enough bandwidth to do the hangout, their internet cafe is going to be on show to the world.
Yeah, but then I don't feel it would be comfortable, you know. It really feels like in the 90s, probably joining an internet cafe. Or
well, the alternative is a lot of the pubs around Brighton, of course, have free Wi-Fi, and that's a great place to broadcast from.
Actually, I was thinking to use the one from the gym because it's 10 times more powerful than the one that I have at home. So yeah, but yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, hopefully from the next week after the next, I will be settled down properly in the new job. So.
Was it my imagination, or did Kristin suddenly look really thoughtful at the idea of muscular men in the background of your video in future?
Oh wait, what? All of a sudden, I must have missed that one.
That would be from the gym cafe, so there would not be anyone. Especially with the weather now in London, you would have people with like a probably heavy coat and not
definitely not the locker rooms, Kristin.
I don't like all muscly people anyway. It just means they're spending too much time not building this one.
No, don't worry guys, it's not gonna happen.
So let's start winding down for this week, and what are you up to this week, Fer?
Is it me? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, nothing special. I'm going to train people. I'm leaving, so hopefully to pass them as much knowledge as I can. And but it's actually interesting. I've been doing that a lot recently, and everyone is pretty much at the same levels. It's good. It's good exercise because it can keep you fresh on a lot of topics. So I've been at the same time reading a lot, because when you have like 5 to 10 people that you have to train on a subject, and they're probably going to ask you a bunch of questions. So well, it's been good. But
Bill and I have often said that, you know, it's a really important part of mastering any knowledge is preparing and being able to teach it. It really helps crystallize your own understanding when you then have to pass that on sensibly to somebody else. So I do think that training is a wonderful part of one's own mastery.
One of the best learning experiences I went through ever was teaching a class of school teachers internet literacy. Because I taught them about the internet, they taught me about teaching. It was a good exchange.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And most of the time when the audience is not very much into that, or is coming from maybe a different background, that's when it becomes more interesting. I generally don't enjoy maybe those meetings where there are just SEO people, but when there's someone that obviously is within the industry, but is not just focused on SEO, that's where a lot of different point of view can come into the picture. And I went recently to an event with like a few people, and it was so interesting. We basically had a very animated conversation for like 1 hour after a presentation, and it was very good. But are good opportunities, because the day you kind of prepare yourself for that, you always explore that in depth a lot. So
yeah.
I have a friend who refers to that as cross-pollination.
Yeah.
And it really is. You work with people who maybe have different backgrounds than you, different educational backgrounds, different experience backgrounds, and you teach each other. You come up with unique ideas because of that. You say, hey, I've tried this before. Why don't we do something similar? How does that work? you explain it, and learn from each other as you're working. I think it's a good way to advance projects.
As regular viewers will know, Bill and I both spent a good number of years at the Creator Site forums, and one of the things that made those forums so good was the fact that people were coming from a lot of different disciplines, including at times disciplines that really didn't think much of SEO because they'd kind of met the shallow end of it, shall we say? Where it's kind of like you write what you like, and then we'll go and jiggle some keywords into it, or something like that. Yeah, that doesn't really work. But being able to talk about the common ground between usability and SEO, and there's huge amounts of common ground. In both cases, really, your whole goal is to be user-focused. If you're not user-focused, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. It's not optimized for the people searching if it isn't optimized for people. If you're hitting Google algorithms, but it's not working to, convince people, it's pointless whether it ranks #1 because it's not going to convert anybody.
We had a couple people involved in those forums who were heavily into accessibility too.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can help make your pages, your content accessible for people, and remember that a search engine is a visitor to your website too, and you need to make that content accessible to them as well.
Yeah. So as we were talking about how you'd serve content for blind users or deaf users, so making sure that your website was going to work with a screen reader piece of software, making sure that it was going to work for people who were colorblind, making sure that it would work for people who had limited mobility and need to do all of their navigation through a site with a keyboard rather than a mouse because they lack the fine motor skills. All of those kind of things are issues that will also make you think about how anything that isn't able to use the website the way you do, with a keyboard and mouse and your eyes, can access that site, which includes search engines, which don't have eyes and don't use a keyboard and don't use a mouse. They navigate a different way. And all of those things, yeah, absolutely, cross-pollination, or cross-training if you prefer.
Right, so if you use alt text on an image, and you should, if the image isn't just decoration or redundant, you want to describe it. You want to use an image that actually has some meaning, some relevance to what your page is about. And people find pictures to put on pages that don't have a lot of meaning. Mm-hmm. And then they stuff keywords into alt text for those pictures instead of, one of those pictures that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes it's worth no words because it's not that good. Choose pictures that are meaningful. Choose alt text that describes it well and may use the keywords that your page is about. If you're going to add a title in addition to the alt text, don't make it a duplicate of the alt text and then make the anchor text the same words. If someone's using a screen reader to visit the page, they don't want the same phrase barked at them 3 times in a row. Mm-hmm. They'll get bored with the page really quickly.
Exactly. These things, by checking how it sounded when read out, some of those pages were terrible and people never even thought that, hey, the search engine may be seeing it exactly that way.
Right.
Yeah.
If you
exact phrase repeated 3 times.
If you visit YouTube and you start watching the closed captions for videos, if they're created in an automated manner, they're often wrong. They're
butchered.
They mispronounce the names of the companies that the videos are about. They mispronounce the names of the places. If Google is using captions to help index those pages. It's not good.
So you'll come up with a keyword for like butt. Like I've seen that.
Right. So I watched about 300 videos one summer and looked at the closed captions, and the only one that had the captions right was a State of the Union address from President Obama. Everybody else's were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so
this is one of the areas where working to a script can be an advantage, because you can then literally copy paste the script straight into the closed captions. You know what's been said even before it's been said.
Right, makes it easier. So
getting the transcriptions afterwards, that's tough and expensive.
Right, so if they're a commercial and you're not pronouncing the name of your company correctly, you're not helping yourself.
If you're not American, it doesn't like your accent much. I tried looking at the automated closed captions for a couple of episodes of Ammonized when I did those.
Yeah.
Oh my!
I think that's where I saw the butt.
One word that I'd said in the first 5 minutes.
You're lucky that you still speak English properly. Imagine people that are trying to.
We have a client who has a nationwide radio show, and they talk about technical issues that people would search for. So if they were found for transcripts for those, that'd be really great. And the first time I actually looked at their transcripts, the closed caption stuff, it wasn't that good. So I suggested to them, and the fact that they have lots of viewers for the radio show proved to them that it was stuff that people would search for, that people were interested in.
Yep.
And it was.
You know what I love? I love coming across someone. Stone Temple Consulting does this with their "Here's Why" videos. It's just the first thing that came to my head. And Moz, the Whiteboard Fridays, Rand does this as well. They'll write out and they'll put it as part of their piece of content, the transcript.
Yeah.
And it is so effective for me as a viewer, because as he's speaking, I have this in front of me and I can make notes. It's just, I love it. Like that, as a viewer, that is so helpful.
Yes, it is. And of course, once you're into content production, you realise the work and expense that goes into producing that at the same time as the video, and so on and so forth. Where you're working to a script, where you're working to, I'm going to produce a video on this topic, you're going to think about what's going to go into that in the first place. It is worth actually creating a script, then shooting the script, and using the script itself as the transcript, and you can put them all up at the same time. That's a way of effectively using your time to get all of those things together. Where you shoot a Q&A and you don't know quite where it's going, getting that transcript after the event becomes a lot more expensive. There are a lot of transcription services out there. Most of them give it a once over with a piece of software and then try and clear it up. But a lot of these, they're not very accurate. They're not very accurate at all. I know that Vin bought some transcription for the first episode of his Hangout series, and he's been working for months to try and get it right from what was delivered. Now, it doesn't help that Vin and I both talk a lot, so there was a lot of words in that hour of transcript. But yeah, it is not cheap, and for a lot of companies that's going to be out of their budget for content marketing in the early days. For a lot of print publications it might be out of their budget. when you work it out on a per issue basis and per article basis kind of thing. So it's one of those things you do have to think about. When you can, definitely do it. It's better for short pieces of content, 5 to 15 minutes. But yeah, it's worth it for those. I think when you're getting into 30-minute and an hour broadcast, it's much harder to get done.
When I worked for the court system of Delaware, one of the projects we worked on was real-time transcription in the courtrooms. And the stenographers would write notes as people talked so that they could create things that people could look over, like appeal courts after the fact. We had one case where it was a criminal case. We had a deaf defendant, a deaf witness, and a deaf victim. So
they're having to describe everything that can be seen into the transcript.
Right, and they
in Braille.
They needed monitors at the plaintiff's, the state's desk, and at the defendant's desk, so that the lawyers could object to things if they thought they needed to.
Yep.
And the judge needed to be able to see what was being said on a monitor on the bench, too.
Yeah.
So it was all real-time transcription. And it's like, yeah, that can be expensive, but when you have a person typing it in, it worked. It worked well.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I've always wanted to see a close-up on a stenographer's face when this long piece of evidence goes in, and then one of the lawyers objects, and the judge says, "Strike that from the record," and everything they've just typed for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I'd love to see them rolling their eyes. Couldn't you have objected sooner?
How long were you sitting on that one?
We're out of time. On that note, we're going to have to end for this week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.